I will just say one word and I will give you the floor.
Yeah, basically, I'll just be doing a general introduction of
Yes.
the guest speaker and the discussant. Yeah, thank you.
That's very good. So we can start, I think. Yeah, we can start now. So I wanted to thank you, everybody, to be here at this session of the Critical Decolonialities Seminar that will be centered on queer archiving and decolonial practice, the experience of the GALA Queer Archive. I'm Prof. Barbara Morovich, IFRA-Nigeria Director, and I will very shortly introduce the session. But first of all, I would like to give the floor to Prof. Shola Olorunyomi, Institute of African Studies Director and co-organizers of the seminar. Please, Prof, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, my professor. I'll just move on quickly to do a short clip. As it comes, you know, they come very humble, but it's important that I stress this of Linda Chernis before we move on, that it was a great delight to both IFRA and the Institute that you have given us this rare honor. I would like to say thanks to you as we set out. A brief introduction so that we do not use too much time on formalities to this Decolonialities Seminar, which earlier than this had great minds in the likes of Sonia Osha and the likes. I think we kicked off with that great feminist thinker, Charmaine. Dr. Charmaine is both a theorist and an activist, and has done so much for the feminist world in Nigeria and abroad. So it's with my great pleasure that we have today another insightful friend of knowledge in Linda Chernis, who, in the very little summary, is a GALA Queer, works in the GALA Queer Archives of the University of Witwatersrand. Linda Chernis is a South African archivist and a heritage practitioner who has worked in museums and archives for the past 18 years, 2 years short of 2 decades. She does has passion for bringing history, heritage, and arts to the public, and in this sense, defies the sense of making archive just the reserve of elite interest. Now, Linda has worked as the archive, as the GALA Queer Archive, the archivist of the GALA Queer Archive since 2015, and she recently completed a master's in history. It's my honor to welcome you as our guest lecturer to trigger off the conversation. Is it good morning, good afternoon? I don't know what time of the day it is there. You are welcome.
Thank you so much, Prof. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. In the same breath, I'd like to introduce another notable name. I say to you again, become very humble, but we won't allow the humility to deny us acknowledging who they really are. I have the extraordinary benefit also of being familiar with the next discussant. We had to look for a discussant whom we thought would be necessary to do justice to a work as important as Linda is going to do here today. She's part of the human rights community. She worked for the underserved people, and she also has intervened even on campus for students who are victimized. In very brief summary, Ayodele Olofintuade. Olofintuade represents one of such faces in this country who represent in herself the safe space for all persons running from institutions of containment and all police of victims of police of thought. So she's also the editor-in-chief of Nigeria Feminista, a queer feminist blogazine that has been running since 2012. So for now, I'll stop at this in order not to become the guest lecturer myself. I thank you very much for the opportunity, Professor Morovic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Olorunyomi. I would like to just add a very few things. Just to add maybe that, as already we stated in previous session, academic voices are not sufficient to reveal the complexity of the ways in which the colonial thought is expressed. So this word sometimes in the academia is criticized, sometimes is accepted, sometimes is not accepted, but it's widely used also in the civil society. And I'm not saying that this word is used in the civil society in a very simplistic way, but it's the challenge of today to see maybe how the decoloniality works or doesn't work in the queer archive subject. So I would say that today's challenge is twofold. On the one hand, we are going to look at the importance of giving voice to the minority group and individuals who have been and continue to be persecuted in Africa and around the world. So we are going to explore more specifically the importance of preserving the memory of the struggle through the example of the GALA Queer Archives in South Africa. But on the other hand, we will be looking at how the coloniality comes into play in these questions, how things have changed since the end of the apartheid for queer groups in South Africa, and how even today, certain conservative discourses all over the world, but in particular in Africa, certain conservative discourses on homosexuality as on feminism stem from the idea of a Western import and the negation of endogenous or indigenous inputs on the matter. And with this, it will be my last sentence. If Nigeria and South Africa seem different on their approach to homosexuality concerning the law, there are some important similarities within the activist groups. We will see how the South African Peace Must Fall protest echoes the Nigeria and SARS, and both movements have opened up to the expression of freedom, conversation, ideological fights, etc. So finally, I would like to stress that this session opens to the importance of activism and the dangers of it. So before giving the floor to Linda Chernis, I really would like to thank immensely the two speakers to have accepted to be with us today. So thank you, and Linda, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I'm just going to jump right in because we've had some two very nice introductions. So I just want to share my screen. Okay, I think we can all see, yeah?
We can see. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, cool. I think I might just camera off as well. So I want to start by giving you just a very short introduction to GALA, to our Queer Archive, and then to go into some examples of how we try to challenge traditional concepts of archives and history. And then perhaps we can discuss together whether these innovations are decolonial in nature and practice, or perhaps whether queer archives are by their very nature part of a decolonial practice and discourse. And I want to add here that I'm an archivist, I'm not an academic, so please be gentle with me as I am not an expert in decolonial theory. So GALA was initially called the Gay and Lesbian Archives, and we were formed in 1997. And the main aim around establishing GALA was to address the erasure and omission of queer lives and histories from public museums and archives in South Africa. So this was the late 90s. It was a time when South African museums, archives, heritage sites were being reconceptualized in the wake of our new democracy. And the drive behind GALA was really to make sure that queer history and voices and lives were not left out of this movement, this moment that South Africa was going through. So we began as a project of the Wits University Archives, but we soon outgrew our home and became too big to be part of the university archives, and we became independent. So since 2007, we've been an independent non-profit archive, although we are still based on a university campus where we rent space from the university. Access to the archives is open to anyone by appointment. And we require appointments because our collections are site because we just don't have enough space, and then we order them in as people request them. We don't require researchers to fill out extensive formal paperwork to access collections. I know a lot of archives do this, and we find it puts up barriers and really favors academic researchers above other researchers. We acknowledge that there are a wide range of people who might want to access material, and this includes artists, activists, filmmakers, to realize that archives are not just for academics. We also have a community library on site, which you can see in the photo, and this is used as a safe space for students as well. So as Barbara mentioned briefly, one of the main aims of our archive is to challenge this notion that homosexuality is un-African. This concept was unfortunately taken up by various African independence movements who claimed that homosexuality was a Western import and not part of African culture. This has been challenged by many scholars who argue that it is in fact homophobia that is a Western colonial import that came with the introduction of sodomy laws, Christianity, and gendered language. Language in particular supports the more fluid notions of gender and sexuality existed in many African societies prior to colonialism. In terms of the archival records we hold, unfortunately, they only go back as far as colonial era court documents. And it must be remembered that the bulk of our materials are from South Africa. We don't purport to be a queer archive for the entire continent, although we do hold records for certain organizations outside of South Africa that were specifically donated to us, such as the records of SMUG in Uganda, or sent to us for safekeeping, such as the records of GALS in Zimbabwe. We house over 200 collections, and these include personal collections, organizational material from LGBTQI organizations and campaigns, pride marches, cultural events, oral history projects, and more. Although same-sex relations have existed throughout the world, throughout history, and are therefore certainly not un-African, we do recognize that particularly in South Africa, we were vulnerable to the import of the Western concept of gay identity and gay activism. And this is definitely reflected in the archival record of the early gay, mostly white organizing of the 1980s. The legacy and history of colonialism, and in our case, apartheid, cannot be ignored. These are part of our history, and they are there to be interrogated. Archives are bound up with the question of whose history is worth preserving. Like many archives that gather material from marginalized communities, we place an emphasis on collecting oral history interviews, lived experiences, storytelling, and collecting of non-traditional types of documentation, with a focus on including stories and histories from those voices that have been marginalized, both from society, but also from within the queer community. And these include histories and everyday lived experiences of Black lesbians, trans and intersex histories, and beyond that, the gaps still remain, such as the underrepresentation of rural queer voices. A lot of what we document is from activists and organizations that are based in cities. So that's one gap that we still are trying to fill. And obviously we'll never fill all the gaps. We'll never tell the whole history of, of queerness. In more recent years, scholars in post-colonial and decolonial studies have broadened our understanding of archives and what is meant by a document or a record or evidence. At GALA, we have a large amount of paper-based documents, but we also place a lot of importance on what is sometimes termed ephemera. So ephemera can include things like postcards, posters, flyers, stickers, and all these items that form an important part of movement building and activism. The term ephemera itself describes something that is meant to be transient, fleeting, not kept. So by archiving these items, they challenge their very classification. Being an independent archive means that we have a certain amount of freedom in our project work. In addition to the archive program, GALA is involved with research, youth work, public education programs, book publishing, film projects, conferences, dialogues, exhibitions, cultural events, more. We use these methods and events to bring the archive to the public, as well as to build the archive through public contributions and engagements. So as a queer archive and as an activist archive, which is often how we describe ourselves, we're aware of some of the pitfalls of archives, of their sometimes exclusive and extractive nature, and of the inherent power relations that exist. For this reason, we try to document lived experiences, and for those involved to tell their own stories as far as possible, to have agency and control over the narratives that are preserved and shared. And some of the ways that we try to do this are by working through partnerships and collaborations. This might sound sort of like a nothing sentence, but honestly, we're a very small team of 4 people, so we have to partner and collaborate to achieve what we do. Also by creating spaces and methods for contributing to the archive, by archiving the present, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, language and sharing resources digitally, and by activating the archive through events, exhibitions, publications, and as far as possible, making these spaces and resources free and accessible. So I'm just going to touch on some of these points by using a few examples. Sorry, I have come down with the flu. I just need to take a sip of water. So recently, GALA's made much more of an effort to archive the now, to archive the present, to make sure that in 50 years' time, we're not scrambling and digging into the past to try and find queer experiences and voices in major historical moments. And so one example again, and Barbara touched on this, so one of the first projects that was part of this Archiving the Now movement was our Fees Must Fall Queer and Feminist Oral History Project. We interviewed student activists involved in the protests in 2015 and 2016 across 7 university campuses, amidst the silencing of queer and feminist voices and leaders in both the Fees Must Fall and Roads Must Fall movements. So I don't have time to go into all of these examples and collections in great detail, so I'm going to skim over them. But please, if anyone wants more information on anything I've said today, you must just please get in touch. So our current Archiving the Now collection that we are working on is gathering accounts of the impact of the withdrawal of US aid and PEPFAR on queer health in South Africa. So I'm sure the same in Nigeria, but you know, overnight clinics closed. We had quite a few clinics that, you know, served the MSM community in particular, providing ARVs, PrEP, and they just closed overnight. So yeah, we're trying to kind of gather information on the impact of that. And I think this archiving of the present feeds naturally into a discussion of the digital, of material and collections that are born digital, and how with the advent of the digital and social media age, more and more people are producing content and documenting their own lives and communities. This has led to an explosion of documentation through phone cameras and videos, leaving archives like ours, that is living, growing archives, with somewhat of a problem of what to archive in the midst of so much content. On the positive side, this has created a shift in power in who creates and who contributes to the archival record, and where and in what way archives are viewed, while keeping in mind that with the digital, there come new barriers to access. There's also something we can talk about a bit later, but I know a lot of the kind of queer archives that have popped up in recent years only keep digital, and this is partly just because we're in a digital age, but also because it's not safe to keep paper-based records. So maybe that's just something we can touch on in the discussion as well. So the next example that I want to share with you is our Queer Activism in Africa anthology series. These anthologies highlight some of the necessary work happening on the continent to advance queer rights and combat discrimination. To quote from the introduction to the first volume, In Hopes and Dreams, instead of allowing history to retroactively explain who we are, let us write and build our own nuanced history by telling our individual and collective stories. And I think this really sums up a lot of what we're trying to achieve. So this series of books, of anthologies, began in 2021 as a partnership with Taboo Media, who run workshops with queer activists from across the continent. And their stories of activism are then developed post-workshop through a writing mentorship and editing process. Each story is also then given to an illustrator to interpret, and we've gotten some really beautiful illustrations across the 4 volumes. And all the volumes are available as free downloads, as well as a limited number of free physical copies. Again, if anyone is interested, you can download these off our website. If you want me to try and get you some free copies, I'm sure we can send them in the French diplomatic bag. So as we know, language is strongly tied to issues of power. And for that reason, GALA is attempting to move beyond only publishing in English. Due to the strong presence of stories from activists from Francophone countries, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th volumes are all published in English and French. So that's last 3 on the screen. But then furthermore, at the end of last year, we compiled and brought together stories from across the 4 anthologies and loosely grouped them by region and language. And the 3 new anthologies are now in Portuguese, Swahili, and Arabic. And I'm going to stay with the Activists in Africa series just for one moment longer, because I want to also tell you about an animation project that we ran over the last 2 years. Partnering with Africa Queer and Fakugesi to queer identifying animation students to apply for a workshop program. The students could choose a story from any of the anthology volumes and were tasked with adapting these into short animations. And this could be in the language and context of their choice. And then they went through a sort of workshop and mentoring process. So it's also about skills development, as well as sharing, as well as storytelling and sharing the archive. So 2 of these were selected each year for further development, and they've been screened at digital arts festivals and events. And we hope that projects like these will not only impart skills and give exposure to students, but also increase our audience and reach new people through new methods of engagement and crossing barriers of language as well as literacy. I'm going to show you one of these short animations. So we did do a little bit of a video check before, so let's hope it holds. Somebody please interrupt me if it's not coming through.
Ever since South Africa legalized gay marriage in 2006, queer people have had nothing to worry about, and we can spend our pride parades just having fun. That's queer privilege, right?
So, you girls are together, right? Mind if we join?
Ever since South Africa legalized gay marriage, queer people have had nothing to worry about, right?
Yeah, so that's animation also, in addition to being an example of how we're trying to kind of think of new ways of storytelling and bringing history and contemporary experiences to the public. It's also a stark reminder, and again, as Barbara said, that despite South Africa being in a strong legal position regarding queer rights, it doesn't always mean that things have changed on the ground, and queer people are still subject to huge amounts of discrimination and violence by society. So I want to move on to a last example of some of the ways we try to do things differently with the archive, and that is the QP collection, exhibition, and legacy project. So, and this is a good also example of what I mean by activating the archive. I've talked a lot about the more contemporary archive, but this is a historic collection that we've tried to bring to life. So in 2018, we launched an exhibition of some of the photos in the QP archive collection. QP was a well-known queer performer and hairdresser from the Cape Town area of District 6. The photos in the collection date from the 1950s to the early 1980s, and they show QP at work in the salon, portraits of QP's friends, lovers, and neighbors, images from parties, snapshots taken of everyday life in the local area, and photo shoots of QP's friends on the streets of District 6. And the photos also show us that, although in a very specific way, the queer community in District 6 at that time was integrated and accepted. They were not hiding, they were very much out and visible in the community. The photos also show us the changing physical and political landscape of District 6 amidst the atrocity of the apartheid government's campaign of forced removals of the 60s and 70s. So this was a time when the apartheid government was designating certain areas to be whites only, especially the areas closest to the city center, and District 6 was one of those. And people were forcibly removed out of the area to areas far outside of the city. So QP's photographs show the value of personal archives to tell the potentially lost stories and to insert queer lives into the relatively well-known history of District 6 and forced removals in South Africa. Exhibition, which we hosted in partnership with the District 6 Museum, had an extensive community and public engagement program, and these included hairstyling workshops, costume making workshops, public art workshops, group oral history and reflection workshops, dialogues, film screenings, and exhibition walkabouts, as well as a Reclaiming Pride Queer Heritage Day parade through the District 6 streets. But QP's legacy continues to grow and inspire through the QP Legacy Project. A new generation has come together to take inspiration from the past, from QP's legacy, and form the collective known as Salon QP. So it's just important to note here that Salon QP Collective is not GALA. It wasn't started by us. It was independently started by a group of young people in Cape Town who were inspired by the exhibition. So this is an ongoing series of programs and events that utilizes the rich historical archive of QP as a foundation for experimental creative practices and learning. And they include intergenerational dialogues, Vogue and makeup and hairstyling workshops, zine making, and other creative workshops, and what has now become an annual legacy ball. And you can see some of the ball photos in this on the screen as well. And I wanted to end off by sharing a short video that was made a couple of years ago now about the Legacy Project. I mean, it's grown since then, but I think it serves as a great example of how historic archives can be used to insert queer lives into known histories, and how history can inspire and embolden, and how through their activations, the Salon QP Collective are in the process of making their own archive and own history. And I believe an act of decolonizing the archive. We can get that afterwards.
To this day, I'm absolutely in awe of the wherewithal it took for her to go like, I must document my life. This is going to be important for generations to come, because what this archive does in the context of contemporary South Africa, where there's been so much erasure of so much experience through the forced removals, through the invisibilization of entire realities, is contextualize the queer experience. And so what for me is so powerful and potent about this archive is when at 16 I found ballroom, and it was this far away thing that gave me a sense of self and a sense of identity, but it wasn't in the context of my lived reality as a South African. I now found an archive that parallels the origins of ballroom and the themes and spirit of ballroom in the very place where I grew up. And so that is how the work we're going to be doing with understanding ballroom as a culture intersects with the QP collection, which we will be unpacking throughout the week.
Maybe the other one, let's cut it out.
And we go! Side. Is that right? So, forward, shoulder, side. And then you're gonna go close and open. 4, 5, 6, 7.
I could feel that she's got that man. And today to thank the success was young Anne, that was what we did for her and what you still are doing for her. Because I know where she comes from. She's history to our girls. And you must remember, in the apartheid era, I went to jail twice for masquerading as a woman. So in other words, I opened the doors for the girls. Now you people are free. You got it freely because I suffer for it. So please accept who you are. And teachers, don't be hard on gay people, because some of you that I discovered that smiles, but in your heart you don't, because I'm leading right through you. I told them as I felt, because that's the way I felt. And today they didn't have to see me. I think it's a concert of my I'm a very good actress. No, I am as well, but I've been through life. Life taught me to who I am today.
Power idea, if I've ever seen it. So if you understand the tools at your disposal and know what you want to do with it, not necessarily what has to be done with it, because makeup also has a lot of rules. Put the concealer here, put it there. Don't listen to the rules. Make your own rules.
Even scarves and things, there are pieces of fabric that you can wrap around as a bustier.
But mag-ihang upos, die arms van Edan, volgens,
easier to just add things onto your garments now, because we just have to present one thing now. There. Right?
It's going to be a Belmos. Yeah, it's a bit.
Like smile, or like look a little bit shy, or like look kind of excited to be having their photograph taken. QP, however, being QP, engages with the photographers in a slightly different way. So this is the first movie snaps photograph of QP that I've been able to find in the collection. QP, we can see here, is very young. As she passes the movie snaps photographers, she pauses, glances at the camera. You know, she has this polo shirt buttoned up over this like velvet pinstripe suit jacket, fur hat, hair slightly swept back, fresh-faced, gorgeous. She just kind of like glances at the photographer, head slightly tilted, as she knows her photograph is being taken. So this is, to me, seems like a very like intentional, purposeful performance of a kind of like soft glamour.
I didn't know we existed since back then. I only thought that as I grew up, I told you guys, I only thought it was now, as in 2000s, because that's what I've been told. Schools, they don't educate us. Community doesn't educate us. They want to shut us out, but we've been there. You guys have created something inside of me, like, because like now I can say that I'm actually comfortable with myself, because I've been a little bit like an introvert, but I want to be out. I want to be recognized.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll leave it on that note, showing you a bit of the power of archives and what they can do in the present. And yeah, maybe open up the conversation.
Thank you very much, Linda, for this very insightful communication. And without wasting time, I would like to invite Ayodele to comment, to discuss Linda's presentation. Thank you.
So I think that I've heard about the GALA Archives because some of my compatriots have kind of worked with your organization before. I actually have heard about KP. I've heard about them. It's one of our it's always like Nigeria, we're always looking at South Africa as a beacon of oh, this is how we want our own what's it called our own legislation to be. We don't want them to just not say, oh, we're not banning queerness again. We're saying we want you to protect us with the law. And these are things that we've engaged with over a period of time. And also your shining example in South Africa has kind of given us hope about Africa as a whole. Like if it can happen in South Africa, that doesn't mean that it can happen here, in spite of everything. Also, there's a lot of ongoing work, not on legislation, but on archives, actually, in family archives mostly. The engagements with those archives to show that no, you can't treat me like this. You are not allowed to throw me out of my house, which happens quite a lot with the number of queer folks that they've either I had to self-isolate from family members, or I've been isolated from family. I mean, because what I say homophobia, the way I define homophobia, is the society giving you the tools to harm yourself. Because when you start saying your child is not good enough, when you say, yeah, oh, okay, so because I'm gay or I'm lesbian, I'm not good enough. That means you're giving me the power to cause trauma to my own child and break apart my own family and to destroy my own family tree. Because that's how important families are. And also, but I have a few, not just comments, but they say I have like 15 minutes. And so, I know your topic covered quite a lot of things about South Africa, and you're just one organization doing so much. And I also love the bit where he said that you started like translating into Swahili, not just translating outside, but translating for yourselves, because it's so important for us to translate for ourselves what we are. And I know that South Africa is a potpourri of different races and peoples, and that means there are so many different ways in which people are queer in South Africa. It's not just about sexuality. It's not just about like there's a way they make queerness about sexuality, or somebody's transitioning, and like so many people won't even transition medically and you won't even clock them. And some people will transition medically and you will clock them. And I said, it is not about that. Queerness is a way of looking at things that is different from the way the whole society looks at things. And this is why, like, I am like, oh yeah, there are Dutch people in South Africa, there are Indians in South Africa, there are the South Africans in South Africa, you know, and everybody, they have their own language. They have their, it's not just Swahili that the natives speak. There's the indigeneity of each person, the queerness of the indigeneity. Like each person is an indigene of somewhere, of a system, of a system. And when we're looking at indigeneity, it's always tied to land, but I don't think indigeneity is tied to land. I think indigeneity is tied to our genes and being able to belong to our genes. And a lot of times it's our genes crying out and telling us, then giving us dysmorphia and giving us all these things that make us feel like there's something beyond this. There has to be more to this. Why do I have to do what I'm being told this way? And I've seen over and over has not worked for other people. Why do I want to fit into that? Why don't I want to be free? There's something in us that knows about us, that is telling us, look, there is something about it. So I'm asking in the ways in which GALA is looking at indigeneity as archival practice. And when I'm talking about indigeneity, I'm talking about the genes, about yourself, about your lineage, about, because one of the things that we discovered about archives, I mean, a lot of things are archived in museums and in the clouds and in paper. You mentioned earlier how paper itself is self-destructive, right? I mean, over a period of time, it just becomes, and museums burn down, you know. The only things that belong to us truly are the things that we store in ourselves and we share as communal memory. That's like storytelling, the style of Riot, when somebody will start the story and somebody else will pick it up from where you stopped because somebody remembered what their grandmother said about the same thing and another person picks it up. And those are indestructible because they're passed down from one generation to another. The second one that I wanted to talk about briefly or engage with you about the GALA archives, like I said, I'm not expecting that my questions or my comments are taken as a set of rules or something. It's something that I've observed even in the Nigerian community of making superstars instead of making communities. Like we're always expecting to be saved. There's always this person that is the designated savior, the first person that threw the stone, the first person that came out as trans, first person that came out as queer, the youngest person that is in the room, the smartest person that is in the room, and not necessarily the community, like looking at everybody's abilities and disabilities and fitting in as one body, like I said, feeding back into the indigeneity of archival practices. And then you talked a lot about decoloniality. And you say you don't know me of decoloniality, neither do I. I hear it thrown around a lot. I'm not an academician. You know, I'm a writer, I'm a published writer too. I have a bunch of books that I've written about queerness in my own knowledge of it, in my own traditions and being, and decoloniality. And I recently came across somebody talking about colonialism itself as an interruption and not the main event. Like colonialism didn't bring civilization. What colonialism does is interrupts the civilization, the growth of a people. And one of the major things I learned to do in my life, and that has worked for me, is decentering, not making certain things my center. And I'm looking at how our archives can decenter coloniality from our stories and focus on the surviving, on the methods of surviving, and not like to keep looking outwards at people to stop being what they are, but looking at ourselves to create what we want to be and how we define our spaces, our safe zones, where our boundaries are, and putting in, how do you put it, measures to ensure that those boundaries are not broken through, which is usually what's like violence. Because when you look at queer histories, it's always like somebody else is always in charge of our safety. It's either the government or some other powerful people. Even when we build it ourselves, I remember when we were talking about fees must fall. I remember what was going on in South Africa back then, and we're all so proud and we're like so cheering and supportive. And even there was this one about the hair thing in schools, that little girl that started the whole movement. And it's something that was started by a femme body, right? It's always femme bodies that it puts on the line. It's always femme bodies like that body is perceived as feminine. They're always on the line. They are the mothers, they are the nurturers, they're everything. They're the ones that foresee, no, this has to end here. I'm done, you know. And it's always femme bodies that are the memory keepers. And femme bodies putting themselves as, we're always like the barrier. We are always throwing ourselves in front of the trucks and getting all and nobody. But at the end of the day, it is we create the structures that are already on ground now absorb all our work and moves.
Sorry, I think I missed you the very last thing you said. Sorry.
I said what happens, like the structures on ground that have been built, like to take, like success stories are so sweet, right? Everybody wants a success story. Somebody that defies and then becomes absorbed into the mainstream. We make the margins our mainstream, and then the mainstream comes, takes the margins, puts it and absorbs it into itself and erases us.
Yeah, well, it's either the heroes or the victims, right? Because the other thing that I love to do is concentrate on the victims, but like, not the in between.
Yeah, there's also that I think that's like my final points about victims. I think it's still the same thing going back to superstars versus communities, victims versus saviors. That Superman mentality, what's up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, oh, it's Superman or whatever, it's flying in the sky to save you. But it's never, there's this there's this prey and predator thing that we talk a lot about in the animal kingdom, but you don't talk about it in real human terms, about the preys and the predators, and their bodies that designated as preys, and those bodies, there's a certain way they have to be preys, and bodies that are designated as predators, those bodies have a sense to be predators. And that's one of the things that queerness does, is to like blur the lines. You no longer can look at a body and determine whether it's a prey or a predator. I think in the recent, about a year ago, one of the girls that is like one of my favorites, one of my children. I call all of us my children, and they resent me for it. In fact, they hate me for it because none of them is a child. I say, no, you're a baby, I'm a baby too. So one of the children went, they are a sex worker. So they went for sex work, and this person suddenly discovered that they don't like trans women as sex workers and wouldn't pay. So they attacked our child, and our child fought back. And, you know, those are the things that the society doesn't like. The society wants to be able to label you as prey or predator so as to deal with you accordingly. And queer bodies are always doing that. And I think a lot of our stories are focused more on persons rather than communities that are building these persons up. Who was at home making tea while Kippy was out there, who was making the food. The communities as those people in the pictures, in the photographs. Where
yeah, I mean, look, and this is part of it, right? We started as an exhibition, and exhibitions don't tell the whole story. Chippy and her friends were sex workers, from what we can understand. Yeah. They experienced violence, and queerness was accepted if you stuck to the binary of male female. So Chippy and her friends presented as female, and they had boyfriends, but two masculine men walking down the street holding hands would not have been accepted, you know. So it was very definite, and it's yeah, often with these kinds of storytelling projects and exhibitions, we're telling one side of a story, we can't tell the whole story. But this is also what we're inviting by opening it up to the public, is to get people to interrogate, to ask the questions, to look deeper, because we can't tell all the stories or the whole stories. So yeah, it's to open it up to the public to question, to dig deeper, to find a little part, say, okay, where were the lesbians in District 6? People are always asking us that. It's like, well, please go look, go do the research, and then bring it to the archive. You know, it's, yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, like, sorry. I just want to say that you have to answer all my questions now. I hope you noted them down.
I'm going to try.
Because I'm done with the questions, yes.
Oh, you have questions now, or can I touch on some of the things?
No, I said I'm done with all my questions.
Oh, okay, cool. So just going back to my notes, one of the things you said was mentioned about the importance of family, and family archives, and how many queer people are kicked out the house, and that's made me think of a few different things. For one, it's, you know, homelessness is a big problem in South Africa more broadly. It's even more of a problem for queer people because they often experience discrimination and violence in shelters. You know, so if it's because shelters are usually gendered, right? They're usually women's shelters, men's shelters, and so queer bodies have difficulty in our homeless shelters. There is one queer shelter in Cape Town, but it's always very full. It's, you know, can only take a certain amount of people. There's nothing in Joburg. So that's a big problem. Even with, there's quite a lot of support in the queer migrant community when queer migrants come to South Africa. They have their own sort of internal informal safe houses, and they kind of look after each other to a certain extent because they know that they'll be rejected by the rest of the migrant community, right? So but often South Africans who have been kicked out the house don't have that same network. It sounds almost contradictory, but it's almost like there's more of a community amongst queer migrants than there is sometimes with queer South Africans, you know, who've just come to the city and they don't know where to go when they get kicked out. Also, you know, the idea of sort of mental health and families, and it's so scary how we're just going backwards. You know, in the US, they've stopped the suicide hotline for queer identifying youth. You know, that they've just shut that down. So it's again, you know, it's all these things that are starting, well, not starting in the US, but are being amplified in the US and spilling over to the rest of the world. It's really, really scary. you mentioned quite a bit about indigenous queerness and land, and that's the intersection of queerness and land is something that hasn't been researched a lot, but it's come up a couple of times this year for us. So there is a researcher who's doing her PhD on this topic. So obviously, land is quite a political issue in South Africa, as it should be. And again, the US are poking their nose into our policies, but land is also a very gendered thing. So it's not just racialized, right? So when land is kind of passed down, or when the government gives, land to poorer communities, it often goes to men, and it's yet the women are the ones leading the household. And then how does that work with queer bodies and queer inheritance? And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what research, what she comes up with. Look at my notes, sorry. Yeah, storytelling as as you say, it's also often women who carry these stories, who carry history, who pass it down. And my worry is that storytelling is disappearing the world over. Again, with the digital age, we record ourselves, we think it's online, we think we're telling our stories, but are we telling them to each other? Are we telling them to our children? Are we even speaking to our children? How much of that is being passed down? I don't know. I worry that not enough, and that sort of oral tradition of storytelling is disappearing. But I think there is a lot of renewed interest in storytelling as history, at least in certain archive circles, history circles. So let's hope that there'll be a new generation of that. Yeah, and I was just very interested to your sort of comments on the savior complex, and we did talk about that a bit, about the sort of queer icons on the one side and then the queer sort of tragedy on the other. But most people are somewhere in the middle, leading their everyday lives, and it's those stories that we also want to tell, because the QP stories are wonderful and they're shiny and they're beautiful, but there's a lot in between, right? So how do we get those stories out, and how do we make people interested in them? And I think this is a problem that not just queer archives, but any archives dealing with kind of history from below, where we kind of studying the great male figures of history, where we want to study the everyday life of people as history. How to make that interesting and engaging, and yeah, how to get people excited about it.
That have the opportunity to participate in this, and also now I have being my bonnet that I'm going to start bugging me, and I'm going to start asking questions, and I have you to thank for that. Thank you so much, Linda.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much, Barbara. Yeah, yesterday was the first time that we meet, and I'm now like, oh gosh, I've had so much fun. I've taken you to the underground places where you have eaten pepper soup and goat meat. I'm probably got food poisoning or something, and that will be memorable. But you will get food from my parties. But yeah, lovely. Thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it. I hope that we'll have more collaborations.
Yes. Thank you very much to both of you, really. And it was really interesting. Linda, I really hope to see you again in South Africa. Yeah. And for sure, Ayodele, I will see you next door just now.
Yes, I'm just...
Linda, thank you so much. And really, I will let you know when I'm coming back to South Africa. And I hope to continue working with you. And anyway, I enjoyed very much this presentation. And thanks again to everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Ayodele, I hope to meet you in person one day. Maybe a
yes,
pie.
Me too. Yeah, me too. I really hope we get to meet and then talk some more about archives. All right. Thank you.